Welcome to part 3 of the video walkthrough for the Capture the Flag exercise stapler. When we last left off, we had just established that limited shell using the PHP reverse dash shell script. And now we're going to go ahead and start pounding away trying to get some, I should say, privileged access using a couple of more exploits. Let's see how this is going to work out. So at my shell script, I've typed in who am I, and you'll see that we are logged on as www.data. Well, we need to be logged on as root to be able to have full root access. So let's go ahead and see how we're going to do that. From our earlier enumeration of this particular target, we found out that the machine was running Ubuntu 16.04. Well, we need to find out if there is an exploit that will allow us privilege escalation onto this machine so that we can get root access. Let's see how we go about doing that. Using searchploit, I typed in Ubuntu along with the version number, and then I followed that up with privilege escalation. Now if you go down here, you're going to have to find the kernel that we're currently using, and for us that's going to be 4.4.x, but also this has to be the 32-bit, which is the operating system that we currently have on our target. So we're going to look at this particular exploit right here, 39772.txt. I recommend going out to the internet and getting the latest version of this exploit. These get updated all the time. So just open up your browser. Now you can go to the GitHub site and you can go to their exploit database. And inside the database they have a search engine, and you can just type in what exploit it is that you want to find. Here's the download path, and this is also available up inside of the lab file. Now you can see it's pretty long, but again, just go to the GitHub site, or you can just type into Google the name of the exploit, and you'll bring up the search engine for the GitHub site, and then you can download it from there. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what we got here. So here's the download file itself. We're going to do the same thing as we did before with our previous download of that PHP script. We're going to go ahead and save it. We're going to open up the download directory. We're going to go to the download folder itself, and we're going to right click on it, and we're going to move to, we're going to go to our desktop, we're going to select stapler, and we're going to click on the select button. I've already downloaded it once, so I'm going to go ahead and just say replace it. Once you're done there, you can go on back to your desktop, close out your browser, and we can go ahead and clear this terminal, and we'll begin to get busy with this latest download, which will hopefully give us that root access that we need. So the first thing we want to do is just go ahead and do an ls, and let's see what's inside of our stapler directory. And we see that we have this particular download that we just moved on over there. So what we have to do now is extract it. We're going to use the unzip command. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste the name of that directory in there, and I'm going to hit enter. Alright, so now you're not going to see this. What you're going to see is just the extraction of these particular files that are inside of this archive. Alright, so we're going to move on, and now what we're going to do is we're going to get inside of the folder that we extracted. So if we do another ls, you'll see that we have a folder in here called 3972. I should say 39772. So I'm going to go ahead and change directory on over into here. Right click and paste that in there. And now you'll see that my prompt has changed to let me know that I'm in that directory. So now what I'm going to do is another ls, and we're going to see what's actually inside of here. So we have a crasher.tar and we have an exploit.tar. So we're now ready to extract the contents of the exploit.tar. To do this, I've typed in the command tar space xvf space exploit.tar. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And this is the contents of this particular exploit.tar file. So we're going to list the contents of the 39772 directory one more time. And you'll see now that we have another directory inside of here called the ebpf underscore long name double put underscore exploit. we're going to change directory over to that location. Now, make it easy on yourself. Do a CD and just highlight and copy it. No need to try to fat finger that one. So we're going to do a copy, and I'm going to right click in here and paste, and I'm going to hit enter. Let's do an ls and see what's in this location. We have a compile.sh, doubleput.c, hello.c, and we have another file called the suid helper.c. This particular exploit requires some finesse, so make sure that you're following along with the instructions exactly as they're written. I'm going to back up one level. I'm going to go into the 39772 folder again. To do this, I just type in cd space ... Now I'm back to my 39772 directory. To move these exploits up to the web server that we want to gain root access to, we're going to have to create our own HTTP server inside of the 39772 directory. To do this, we're going to use a very small Python script that's going to build for us a very small HTTP server running on port 8000. Let's see how we do this. So there's the script itself. It's a Python script, very small. Python space -m space followed by simple HTTP server. Watch your syntax. Make sure you spell it correctly. Now, it has to run inside of the 39772 folder because that's where the exploits are located. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now we are serving HTTP on the root of port 8000. So inside of this 39772 folder, I have started a very small HTTP server. So we go ahead and minimize this. Let's get back on over to our shell. Now, from our shell, we're going to use the wget command, and we're going to type in wget, the path, and the port along with the exploit that we want to upload. Let's see how we do this. So here's the wget command that I used. Now let's explain this. I did an wget space followed by the IP address of my Kali machine, not the WordPress machine, because I'm saying to this shell, I want you to go to the web server located at .28, and I want you to upload the exploit.tar. So let's go ahead and hit enter. And so we get a denied permission. That's because we're not in the right folder. So if you look at it and you do an ls, you've got to go in here and you've got to find a folder to which you have permissions to. This gets a little tricky because a lot of these folders aren't going to let us do anything. But there's a good chance that if we go inside of the temp folder, we can. So what I want to do here now is I want to do a CD over to the temp folder. So I'm going to attempt to get into the temp folder by doing a CD tmp, and you'll notice that I did. So I'm now inside of the temp folder. Alright, so now we can run that wget command one more time, and hopefully this time it's going to work. And we get an OK. So we were able to just change directories into a folder to which we had permissions, and we were able to upload the exploit.tar using the wget command. So let's go ahead and do an ls, see what's inside of this temp folder, and we see we have the exploit.tar. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to expand this one more time. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste this in there. So again, it's tar space xvf space exploit.tar. Go ahead and hit enter, and it'll let you know that those files have been extracted. So we're going to change directory over into this folder here. So I've typed in CD, and I've typed in, or I've copied and pasted in the path, and we're now inside of that folder. So we can do another ls, and we have the compiler.sh waiting for us, doubleput.c, hello.c, and the suid helper.c. All good stuff. Alright, now we're going to change permissions on the compiler so that we can run it as an executable. We're almost done here. So we're going to do the change mod space +x. Now this is going to compile the .sh as an executable, and that's done. Now we're going to run the compiler.sh as a script. Let's see how we do that real quick. So I've typed in /compile.sh. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And in just a moment it's going to come up and it's going to give me some information about what's going to happen here within the next 60 seconds. So that's been done. Now we need to do another ls, and this time we're going to run another script called the double put. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that on over here. So this script is going to be also ran. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on that one. And from here it's going to start to write, and it's going to get us the root access that we need. So you do everything as it's outlined inside of this part 3, and you do it correctly. And it, like I said, it does require a little bit of finesse because you've got to follow this exactly as it is instructed. So it's telling you that you're going to have root access in about 60 seconds. Alright, so we have root access now. I can go ahead and hit enter. So we've given it long enough, at least 60 seconds. So I've typed in cd space /root, see if we can get into the root folder. So I guess I'm into the root folder now, so let's do an ls. And we have a number of files in here, and the one I'm interested in is the one that's called the flag.txt. I'm going to cut out the flag.txt and see what we show here. And we have now achieved root access. So there are some things in here that you've got to be aware of, such as waiting the 60 seconds, doing the right commands at all time, and being attentive to this last part of the walkthrough. It's very particular. If you skip any of those steps, you don't do the HTTP server, you don't do the extraction correctly, then you're going to have grief. So make sure you follow the directions exactly as they are shown in this video and in the lab. That concludes this 3-part video walkthrough for the Capture the Flag exercise called Stapler. Now, if you have any questions or concerns about anything that was covered in this video, please do not hesitate to reach out and contact your instructor, and I'll see you in the next Capture the Flag exercise. Greetings and welcome to the step-by-step walkthrough for the Capture the Flag exercise known as Mr. Robot. In this lab you will attempt to capture 3 hidden flags using the hacking methodology. This CTF exercise has 3 hidden keys in different locations. Your goal is to find all 3. Each key becomes progressively more difficult to find. The level of expertise for this CTF is considered somewhere between beginner to intermediate. There isn't any advanced exploitation or any reverse engineering. The lab requirements for this particular CTF are 1 virtual install of Kali Linux and 1 virtual install of the VM Mr. Robot. The CTF uses a custom VM OVA file that can be imported as an appliance in either VirtualBox or VMware. The Mr. Robot OVA file is approximately 704 megabytes and it downloads very quickly. The site is well maintained and the links for the downloads are in the lab file. For this demonstration I'll be using VMware Workstation, and I have both my Kali and Mr. Robot VMs up and running inside of the terminal. Now, if you click on the Kali Linux and you look at the settings for your network adapter, make sure that you use the same settings for your Mr. Robot virtual machine. So they both got to match up. If you don't do that, you're not going to have connectivity and you will experience epic failure. The first thing we have to do is to discover what network IP addressing we are using for this particular scenario. So we got to treat this CTF as if we've never been on the network before. To discover our network range, we're going to use the utility netdiscover. Just go ahead and type in netdiscover and hit enter. Give it a few minutes and it's going to come up and it's going to run through all the different possibilities for networking, IP addressing, and then it's going to give you the results. My network discovery has completed and I'm looking at 192.168.145.134 as my target. That's the machine where Mr. Robot is currently installed upon. Alright, so that's going to be our target. So make sure that you understand that this is my target, not your target. You have to discover your own IP address. Now that we have discovered our potential target, we need to go ahead and do an Nmap scan so that we can determine what ports and what services are currently running on the target. These are going to be looked at as possible areas that we might want to exploit. So I've typed in the Nmap and I've typed in the long command. Now this is available up inside the lab, and yes, there are different Nmap switches you could have used. Go ahead and hit enter and we'll wait for this scan to complete. Our Nmap scan has completed and we look at the results here in my terminal and we see that SSH is closed using port 22, so that's not going to be of any use to us. But port 80 is running and it's running in an Apache HTTPD server, so we know that this is actually a web server and it's running the Linux kernel. So we know enough about this machine now that we can proceed on with doing some more discovery. To find out what vulnerabilities and what possible venues that we can attack up on side of this Apache web server, we're going to use the nicto -a command along with the IP address to scan that machine for any vulnerabilities. So I've gone ahead and typed in the command. I'm going to hit enter, and in just a few moments we'll get back the results of what vulnerabilities are currently present. Well, we found a number of interesting vulnerabilities and some interesting facts about this particular machine. First off, it is running WordPress, and so we're going to have some fun with that. But right now we're looking at some of the vulnerabilities we discovered, and we're going to start off with the server leaks. So we see that the server is leaking inodes via the e-tags in the header of the robots.txt. This relates to the CVE-2003-1418 vulnerability. These entity tags are an HTTP header which is used for the web cache validation and conditional requests from browsers for resources. The Apache mod negotiation is enabled with multi-views, which will allow us to use a brute force attack in order to discover existing files on the server which use mod negotiation. We have a number of alternatives for the index, such as the index.html and the index.php file, and these can be used to provide us with more information about what's on the website. We have some WordPress pages that are going to be of interest to us, such as the WP links, WP-login, and the WP-admin. We also have a license.txt file that may provide some identity to what type of software is actually running on the site. This can help us get some version information sometimes, not all the time, but it might help us with identifying what version of WordPress is actually running. That concludes our initial footprint of the Mr. Robot web server. And we got some really good information, so we can go ahead and get started by accessing as much as we can of the Mr. Robot site. Now, the only way we're going to be able to access the Mr. Robot site or the VM is using a web browser. So go ahead and open up Kali. And what you're going to do is you're just going to type in the IP address of your web server, or in this case, the target, Mr. Robot. So remember that this is my IP address for my target, not yours. Your IP address will differ. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And this is a pretty interesting website. This is well coded. You'll see that as it starts up, it becomes interactive. Now this is all from the show, Mr. Robot. And I'm not familiar with the show, so if you are, then you have actually seen this before. Now you have some commands that you can actually type in to this website. For instance, if you want to join, you can just type in join, and it comes up with some more script asking you to go ahead and input your email address, which of course we won't do. You won't find much useful out of this particular web page, but you're free to go ahead and explore, type in the commands, and see what other type of interactivity you can get into. From our previous web vulnerability scan, we looked and we found that we had some inodes that were leaking via the e-tags on the robot.txt file. So that should be our next stop. So I'm going to go ahead and place that into my web browser up here, and we're going to go ahead and get on over there and take a look at that. And here is your first key. So the robot.txt has a couple of files that are of interest. First is the fsociety.dic, which is dictionary, and we have our first key, which is key 1 of 3. The next thing we have to do is go ahead and make a folder on our desktop, and we're going to start moving some of these files that we need or that we have discovered over to that folder for use later on in this particular lab. So we're going to be saving the fsociety.dictionary file along with the key-1 of 3.txt. Let's go ahead and minimize our browser, and we're going to close this one out. Now I'm going to open up a terminal, and we're going to go ahead and clear this. Let's begin by going ahead and changing the location over to our desktop using the cd command. Once you have that typed in, go ahead and hit enter. Notice that your prompt changes to let you know that you are now inside of the desktop directory. The next thing we need to do is create a directory on the desktop. And now you're free to call this anything you want. I'm calling this directory Mr. Robot. So I'm going to use the mkdir command to create the directory. And I'm already on the desktop, so that's where it's going to be saved. If I hit enter, you'll notice that the directory, the new directory, pops up onto my desktop. So we're going to use the wget command to pull this fsociety.dictionary file off of the target and bring it on over here to my desktop. So I've typed in wget space the actual path to my target and what file or what directory I want to capture. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and you'll see that it did capture it, and here it is right here. And I'm now going to just push this on up into the folder that I want it to be in, just like that. We're now ready to copy over the key-1 of 3.txt file off of the target machine and bring it on over here to my new directory that's sitting on my desktop. So I've gone ahead and typed in the command. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And now it appears on my desktop, and I'm just going to push that up inside of the Mr. Robot folder. Now you can open up your Mr. Robot folder, and you can open up either one of these. The fsociety.dictionary is just a very long Word file. Contains a lot of different words, a lot of duplicates, and we're going to work on trying to fix that in just a moment. Now the key that we have to have is inside of this key-1 of -3.txt file. If you open it up, you'll see that there's your key. Now this is just a hash, and it doesn't mean anything. you can go out and you can try to break this hash, but it doesn't resolve into anything. So it's just a key that is used to represent the first flag. So our dictionary file is way too big and it contains a lot of duplicates. And so what we're going to do is we're going to shorten this down from the 850,000 words to approximately 11,000. So let's change directory on over to the Mr. Robot folder. Notice that my prompt changes to let me know that's where I'm at now. You can do an ls to check the contents of what's inside of the folder, and we see we have our two files that we downloaded. We can look at the word count inside of the fsociety.dictionary file just by typing in WC space dash small letter L followed by the name of the file. In just a moment it comes back and it tells us that it contains 858,160 words. So we're now going to make this file much smaller by using the following command. We're going to say cat space fsociety.dictionary or .dic space pipe space sort space dash U, which stands for unique. We want to sort all the words inside of this dictionary, make them unique, and then we're going to look at what the new count is by using the WC space dash L command. So let's see what happens. So it comes back up and we've gotten it down from over 800,000 words to just 11,451 unique words. So the next thing we want to do is just go ahead and save this smaller file using a new name. So I've typed in basically the same command, and this time I want it saved as a unique file, and I want to call it something different, so I'm going to call it new fsociety.dic, and I'm going to hit enter, and it comes back to the prompt letting me know that the command completed successfully. Now if I do an ls, you'll see that I have 3 files inside of my Mr. Robot folder. So now we have key 1 in the bag and we're ready to move on to the next part of the CTF, which is looking for keys number 2 and key number 3. Well, that was our first key for this particular CTF, and going forward we're going to find that the next 2 keys aren't going to be as easy. To recap, we were able to do a vulnerability scan using the Netco vulnerability scanner, and we came up with some interesting information about this robot.txt file. And that's what led us in this direction. That concludes part 1 of this series on the CTF Mr. Robot. Now there's going to be 2 more short videos, and each one of those is going to be broken down for the remaining 2 keys. See you in part 2. Greetings and welcome to our second walkthrough video on how we go about acquiring the second key for this Mr. Robot Capture the Flag exercise. We're going to continue on with our discovery by looking at some more of the different pages that are available up on the Mr. Robot site. You'll recall from our NICTO vulnerability scan that we found a number of different web pages up on the WordPress site for Mr. Robot. We're now going to examine these different web pages to see if they offer us anything of usefulness. So I'm going to bring up my browser here, and for brevity's sake I've gone ahead and loaded up all the different pages. We're going to start off with the home page, which we already know about. Now I know that we talked about viewing the source, and this is something that's often overlooked by even professionals, but you can right click on the page and you can view the page source, and this gives you the code. And oftentimes developers will leave little hints of something up inside of the page code, but in this case we're not getting any help, so we can go ahead and close that one out. Now over here is the index.html, and all this does is just keep trying to reload, so we can close that out. That's no use to us either. And then we have the PHP. Now this was the index.php page, and all this does is redirect you back to the main page. So that's not going to be much help to us either. You can go ahead and close that one out. Now normally the license.txt file would give you some information about the version number of WordPress and some other things, but we're not getting anything from this. So we can go ahead and close that one out. That brings us up to the wp-login.php page. Now we can sit here using the fsociety.dictionary file that we created, and we can start typing in usernames that we find in the list of words, but it's going to take us a long time. That's what we call the long way home, and what we're going to do is use some of the tools that we have available to us up inside of Kali, and we're going to go ahead and figure out what the username is, because once we get the username, we can then find out what the password is. So that Burp can actually intercept what we're doing over here on this WordPress login page, we've got to set up a proxy that directs all of the input back over to the Burp suite. And the way we do this, we go on over here to the menu and we click on Preferences. Under Preferences, we click on the Advanced option, and then we're going to click on Network, and then we're going to click on Settings. Underneath Settings, we're going to select the radio button for Manual Proxy Configuration. And where it says HTTP proxy, we're going to type in the loopback address, which is 127.0.0.1, and we're going to be using port 8080. Go ahead and say OK to that. Now, go ahead and leave everything open as it is, and just minimize your browser. Now you can open up the Burp suite. And in just a moment, this is going to start up, and we're going to see how we go about using it. So we're not going to update. We can close that out. This is going to be a temporary project. Say Next. And we're going to use the Burp defaults. We're going to start Burp. Burp is going to start up in just a moment. Now, once Burp starts up, we're going to select the Proxy tab. Underneath the Proxy tab, we want to make sure that Intercept is on. We're now going to bring up our browser one more time. And this time we're going to go back on over to this Word page logon, and we're just going to type in any username, and we're going to type in any password, and we're going to say login. Now, this should have all been captured by the Burp suite, so we're going to minimize this. We're going to check it out, and here it is right here. So we see that we have all the information we need for the logon fields. Now, or I should say the fields that were present on the logon page. So the user is being referenced as log, and the password is being referenced as &WP. So we're now able to tell Hydra, which is going to be our next tool, what fields to fill in with the brute force that is going to use using the fsociety dictionary file that we created, and using the word list that we created, it should be able to figure out a username. Now that we have the information we need for Hydra, we can go back over to our browser and we can remove that proxy. So I'm going to go back on over to the menu. I'm going to open up Preferences. I'm going to go to the Advanced option, Network, Settings, and I'm going to go back up and select the radio button that says No Proxy. I'm going to say OK to that. And now we can minimize this one more time. We need to be working with Hydra inside of our Mr. Robot folder, because this is where the fsociety or the new fsociety.dictionary file is actually located. So Hydra is going to be looking inside of this Mr. Robot folder, and if it's not there, then it's just going to error out. So let's go ahead and see how we format this command for Hydra to be able to use it to brute force the username for the WP logon site using the new fsociety.dictionary file. So now that I have the information about the form fields that I need to input into this Hydra command, I can close out the Burp suite. I've opened up a terminal, and now I have configured this long command syntax to use Hydra to figure out what the username is for the logon for that WordPress site. So I've typed in Hydra space -L, which is list, and I'm telling it to use the new fsociety.dictionary file. And I give it a space -P, which is for the password. Now we can type in anything for the password because we don't care. So in this case, we're just using who cares. Give it a space, give it the IP address of the page, and then we come on down and we say that look inside of the HTTP-form post, and we're telling them to look for certain things such as the log field, which is the user, and the password, which is represented as $.pwd. That equals password. Now it needs to know this because that's the code that's inside the page, and we don't see that. We see username and we see password, but the code that is used to represent this to the machine is something different. That's why Hydra has to know it. We're going to go ahead and just hit enter here. Now this is going to take a while. Now imagine how long it would take if we used the 860,000 word dictionary file that we were given originally. We knocked that down to 11,000 words, and that's going to take still about 5 or 10 minutes. So be patient with this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to start working. Make sure you're running this Hydra program inside of the Mr. Robot directory so that it knows where to find this new fsociety.dictionary file. Again, we're not interested in finding the password. We're only interested in finding a legitimate user account that will allow us to find the password using another utility. Hydra has given me a username by the name of Elliot. So Elliot is going to be the username we're going to use to get us to the next step here. So we're going to use Elliot with the WP scan utility to figure out what the password is for this particular account. We're still inside the Mr. Robot directory, and this is where we need to be because this is where the word list that WP scan needs to see if it can find a password for the Elliot account. So we've typed in WP scan space -- URL, and that's the URL of our target, space -- word list, and that word list is located at /root / desktop up inside the Mr. Robot directory, and the file name is new fsociety.dic or dictionary space -- and the username is Elliot. Now we're telling this WP scan that, hey, we have a username, but see if you can brute force and find us the password for this particular user. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and in just a moment it should come back and give us some information. After about 4 minutes, the WP scan comes back and it gives us the password for the username Elliot. Turns out that Elliot is the main character for the Mr. Robot TV show, and his password turns out to be his badge number, ER28-0652. Let's go ahead and minimize our terminal, and let's bring up our browser, and let's get onto that logon page. Alright, so we're going to type in Elliot and his password. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and that gets us to the main dashboard of the WordPress site. We start with the plugins, and we start going down and we start investigating the plugins to see which ones might be vulnerable. In this case, we didn't have any luck. None of these are actually vulnerable, and the ones that were vulnerable have been updated to a newer version, making them more secure. So whatever vulnerability did exist in the past is no longer valid. Since we have gained access to this WordPress site and we have access to the plugins, what comes to mind is uploading a PHP package or plugin that's going to give us a reverse shell. Now this is pretty easy to do, but you got to follow the steps exactly as they're shown to you here. First thing you want to do is go on out to the internet, and you want to go to Pentest Monkey, and here we can get a PHP-reverse shell. You're going to download this package and save it to your Mr. Robot folder. Okay, we get that done, and then we're going to do some extraction, and we're going to do a couple of other things to get this package ready to upload as a plugin to this WordPress site. So go ahead and download. We're going to start the download here in just a second, and we're going to go ahead and do a save the file. This is going to save it to the default download folder. Once this is downloaded, we can go ahead and open up the folder where it is contained, and now we see that it's here, and we can go ahead and move it. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to say move to, and I want to move it on over to my desktop to the Mr. Robot, and I'm going to go ahead and just select and move it on in there. Close this out, minimize my browser, And let's go on over to Mr. Robot. So once we have the file moved on over to our Mr. Robot folder, we can go ahead and right click on the download. We can say extract here. That creates another folder, and inside that folder we have another folder. And inside here we have the PHP reverse shell.php file that we need to edit. Now to edit this, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to say open with other applications. So I'm going to select LeafPad because I like using it. Now this is what you're going to have to input into this file for this to work. This is part of it. There's actually two areas that we have to modify. This is the first part. We have to add the WordPress header information. So you can go out, I'll take you to the site, and this information is also available inside of the lab file. But you can also go out to the internet and you can go over here to this basepin.com and you can get the information for that header. But as I said, the URL and the actual information is posted inside of the lab file. Alright, so we can minimize this. We come back on over here to our file, and once we've actually done this, where we've gone in and we've added the header information, we have one more thing to edit. And we have to go down here and we have to change this IP address to the IP address of your Kali machine because it is the listener. So this is the listener that you're going to have to change or configure for this reverse shell to work. We're telling the reverse shell that, hey, listen, when this launches, you're going to go back on over and you're going to find this address here, this machine, and you're going to be looking for port 4444, and you're going to create the shell that we so badly need. So we've got all that information inside here, so we're going to go ahead and close that out. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to create an archive, a zip archive. So we right click on the file. Let's do that again. We right click on the file and we just select compress. And from here we select a zip as our archive type and we say create. And there's our archive. So now we're ready to go with that. But before we upload this to the WordPress site, we've got to create our listener. So we're going to bring up a terminal. And on this terminal, we're going to type in NC space dash small letter V space dash small letter N space dash small letter L space dash small letter P space, and we're going to give it the port that we're listing on, which is 4444. All right, we can go ahead and minimize that. Now don't close it out, just minimize it. All right, now we can go back on over to our WordPress site and begin uploading our reverse shell plugin. So I've gone back over to my WordPress site. I'm on the plugins page. I'm going to click on add new. That's going to take us over to the option to upload a plugin. We're going to click on that, and now we're going to browse on over to that zip file we created. And now we're going to select the install button, and in just a moment we should get the option to go ahead and activate this plugin that we just uploaded. So I'm going to go ahead and say activate, and that's going to generate an error message that we can ignore. So we're going to go ahead and ignore that. And now if everything's working, we should be able to minimize this, open up our reverse shell listener, and there is our shell. So now we have a shell access to this WordPress site, and we can start looking for that second key. Now we can check to see who we're logged on as by typing in who am I, and it says I'm logged on as Damien. We can also do a host name. That gives us the operating system. And we can do a CD home, which we're going to do now. And we're now inside of the home directory. Now what we can do here is we can do an ls to list the contents. And you'll see that the only folder that's inside of this home directory is another folder called Mr. Robot. So let's go ahead and change directory on over there. Go ahead and enter. Now I'm inside of that directory. Now I can do an ls. And we see that we have our second key. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and try to cat this out so that we can see the contents of this particular file. But when we try to do a cat to see what the contents are of this particular file, we get a permission denied. So we have a password file, and I'm guessing is that that's where we're going to get the password that we need to get into the account that's going to give us access to this particular key file. So I've gone ahead and I've typed in cat space password, the name of the file, and this is for that password that we need to get access into the key. And it says that it comes back and it tells me that the password for the Mr. Robot account is this big long hash here. So we're going to copy this like so, and we're going to go out to the internet. We're going to find a MD5 decryptor that's going to give us this password. So I've gone out here to this decryptor site. This is called md5online.org. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste that big long hash in here, and we're going to tell it to go ahead and decrypt and see how long it takes. Shouldn't take too long. And in just a moment it comes back with this alphabet. That is the password. It is the entire alphabet. That's the password that we need. So we need to go ahead and copy that because that's just too much to be typing in every time we need to use it. So now that we have the password, and it looks like it's for our username robot, we can go ahead and try to switch on over to this user. And it said it must be run from the terminal. So now we got another problem. So now we're going to have to create a terminal session. So let's see how we go about doing that. We can use the following Python script to go ahead and create a terminal. So I've already typed it into the prompt, but it's also available up inside of the lab file, and you can just copy and paste this if you so desire. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now we've created that wonderful terminal that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and type in that SU robot and try to get over to that user account, and then it wants that long password that we decrypted. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it in here, hit enter, and now we're at the root account, and we now have terminal access. Very cool. So we're now ready to go ahead and bring to the terminal the contents of that text file for the second key. Now we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and now we get the contents. That's our second key. So we've got one key left to go. So I will see you in my next short video on how we go about acquiring that third and final key. Greetings and welcome to part 3 of the video walkthrough for the Mr. Robot CTF. So in our last video walkthrough in part 2, you saw how we went about capturing the key 2 of 3, and we now have one more key to go. So now we have key 2 of 3, we need to go ahead and get on with the business of finding key 3 of 3. And we're going to start off by getting into the root directory of the robot account. We're going to do this by typing in cd space /. That puts us into the very root of the robot account. Now we can type in ls, and we can now see the contents of what is available to us up inside of the root directory or the home directory of the robot account. Now there's not much of interest inside of this home directory of the robot account except for the root. That's the only thing we should be interested in. Everything else looks pretty normal. If we try to get into the root directory by typing in cd root, let's see what happens. It says that permissions are denied. So even though we're logged on as the robot account or the robot user, we don't have root permission. So let's go ahead and see what's going on here with the permission. So we're going to type in ls space -ALH, all lowercase. And that's going to give us the permissions for everything that's listed inside of this home directory for the robot account. Inside of this home directory for the robot user, we can do a find, or we can use the find command to look and see if there is actually a text file available based on what we know about the formatting of the name of the previous 2 keys. So we can do a search or a find for a text file using the name key-3-of-3.txt and see if that exists. And it says permission is denied, so we don't even have permissions to look inside of the home directory. So you see everything inside of here on this home directory is being kicked back for permissions being denied. What we have to do at this point is get an account with root access and with the octal permissions of 4000. So let's see how we go about doing that. So again, using the find command, I'm looking for a program or something that has the permissions set to 4000 or root access, I should say, that's going to allow me to get in and run as the root. So let's see if there's anything available. So we're looking through everything. We're looking for a program that has a root access that's going to allow us to run interactively with that program and give us the root permissions that we need to be able to access that root folder. So let's see if we find anything in here. Now, the only thing of interest that we see is this Nmap. Now, Nmap in the past has had the option that allowed the user to run interactively with it. And we're now going to check to see if we can use Nmap to gain access to the root folder with the root permissions. We know that Nmap has to have root access, root permissions to be able to run on the system. So if we do an Nmap --help, we can also see if this version will allow us to operate interactively with Nmap while it runs at the root level. Let's take a look at this. And we see we have this option down here. So the older versions of Nmap did allow the user to operate interactively with Nmap while it was running. So we see that the switch to use with the Nmap command is the -- interactive. And if I type this in at the prompt and I hit enter, it comes back up and it says welcome to interactive mode. Now you can type in H and you can get some information about what's going on with the interactive mode running with Nmap. What we're interested in is having a shell with root permissions. Now to get this, all I have to type in is the exclamation mark plus SH, and I should get a shell, and then we can do a who am I, and we can see what kind of access we have. And I am root. So now we should be able to get access to that root folder that belongs to that Mr. Robot account. So the next thing I want to do is just change directories on over to the root directory where we were previously denied. And now we are given that wonderful access. Pretty cool. Now the next thing we got to do is see if our key is actually listed or part of this root directory. And I see that it is. We have a couple of items in here, but one of the keys that we're missing, key number 3 of 3, is present. So we now have key 3 of 3. To see what that hash is that belongs to key 3 of 3, again, we're just going to cat the contents of this text file to our terminal, and we are given the hash for key 3. Again, we can now save the contents of this key to our Mr. Robot folder, and we have completed our first CTF. So this is going to conclude the exercise for our first capture the flag, the Mr. Robot CTF. And all I can say is wow, because doing this CTF exercise is just a great way to hone your skills. And regardless of the outcome, you will leave as a better pen tester or a hacker. Now my research showed that there were more than one way to execute a lot of these exploitations that we use. We didn't have to use the Python. We didn't have to use a lot of these different tools. We could have used Metasploitable, but because of the different in the versions that were used in the walkthroughs and what we have actually installed onto the Kali operating system, a lot of the different ways that were used didn't work. And so I went back and I found the surefire ways that would always work, and that was using the Python script and the burp suite and the other tools that we used to accomplish this capture the flag moment. That concludes this 3-part video presentation on how we go about completing the CTF for Mr. Robot. Now if you have any questions or you have any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact your instructor, and I'll see you in our next CTF.